She came downstairs just after 9. She probably expected the smell of coffee, maybe the radio humming low with the morning farm report. Instead, she got silence. No boots by the door. No truck in the driveway. No half-finished crossword waiting on the kitchen table. Just the hum of the fridge and the ticking of that wall clock I always meant to fix. I imagined her standing there, mug in hand, looking around like something didn't add up. Maybe she thought I went to grab breakfast or needed to cool off after a restless night. But after a few minutes, she'd start to notice. The duffel bag was gone. The keys were gone. My coat missing from the hook. The drawers left just enough ajar to show someone had been through them, but not in anger. With purpose. That's when it would have hit her. No note. No warning. Just gone. She probably called my name a few times. Checked the garage. Looked out the window. Maybe even stood there in the middle of the kitchen and told herself it was just a bad dream. But it wasn't. I had left. And for the first time since the day we met, she was the one left behind, and she realized it. But let's go back to the day that started the whole cycle of events in this incredible story. They say trouble doesn't knock in a small town. It walks right up your front porch and sits itself down like it was invited. For me, trouble came wearing pink Crocs and holding a Pomeranian named Daisy. It was a Thursday afternoon. Hot, sticky, and slow. I'd just finished power washing the driveway and was sitting on the tailgate of my truck with a Gatorade in hand. The kind of day where even the clouds seemed too tired to move. That's when Mrs. Beverly Henson wandered over from next door, her little dog skittering beside her, leash dragging like an afterthought. She wore her usual gardening hat and one of those oversized t-shirts that read "Bless this mess." I knew from the look in her eyes, half curiosity, half pity, that she hadn't come over to talk about her tomatoes. She stood at the edge of my driveway, one hand shading her eyes, the other gripping a water bottle with one of those built-in fans. "I saw Jenna's car over near the Sandstone Lodge last week," she said, voice casual, but too deliberate. I blinked at her, the name not registering right away. "Sandstone. That old roadside motel, past Harlan Creek," she added, tilting her head. "You know the one." I knew it. Everyone did. A dying place with a flickering neon sign and a cracked ice machine. Folks didn't go there unless they had a reason to not be seen. I squinted. She was probably just lost or something. She pulled in like she knew exactly where she was going, Beverly said, her tone light, but eyes too sharp. Wasn't alone, either. My heart thudded once hard. "You sure it was her?" She nodded, eyes lowering just enough to make it sting. Same silver Ford Escape. Yoga mat in the back seat. That's when the lie fell into place. Jenna's Tuesday evening yoga class. The one she always came home from flushed and smiling, hair tied up, talking about breathing exercises and finding her center. And suddenly, I could feel it. The weight of all the little things I hadn't questioned. The new perfume. The way her phone never left her side. The sudden interest in her appearance, even on days when she wasn't seeing anyone. I forced a laugh, but it came out dry and cracked. Probably met up with a friend. Who was with her? Mrs. Henson took a long sip from her bottle. Tall fella. Broad shoulders. Wore a baseball cap low, but I'd bet my begonias it was someone she knew real well. Didn't look like no yoga instructor to me. I didn't say anything after that. Just nodded and wiped my palms on my jeans like I was trying to rub the thought out of my skin. She took the hint and shuffled back toward her porch, Daisy's tiny feet pattering behind her. Inside, the house felt wrong. Like the air had shifted. I stood in the kitchen for a while, just staring at the fridge. The calendar was stuck on June. Jenna had circled every Tuesday for her yoga nights. Cute little flower doodles beside them, like it was something to celebrate. I picked up her water bottle from the counter. Still cold. Probably filled it before she left. She always said she liked hot yoga because it sweated out the nonsense. Ironic. Out of habit, I checked my phone. No messages. Just an old text from her saying, "Don't wait up. Might get drinks with the girls after class. Love you." I stared at the screen like it might tell me something else. But it just sat there, glowing. I walked out to the garage and stood there, hands on hips, trying to make sense of it all. 20 miles wasn't that far. 20 years together should have meant something. I kept thinking of how her voice sounded lately, soft but distant, like someone talking through glass. I remembered the way she used to leave notes in my lunchbox. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Made your favorite chili." Those notes stopped around the time yoga started. I wanted to believe there was another explanation. Maybe this guy was helping her through something. Maybe it was innocent. But the part of me that laid brick and built walls for 20 years knew better. Instinct, like mortar, doesn't lie. That night, I sat on the porch in the dark with a cooler beside me, drinking warm beers one after the other. No music. No TV. Just the buzz of bugs and the occasional rustle of wine through the pine trees. I didn't confront her. Not that night. She came home smelling like lemongrass and eucalyptus. Gave me a kiss on the cheek and said class was good but really pushed her hips today. I just nodded and asked if she wanted a tea. She said no, she was tired, and went to bed. And I sat there, long after the screen door creaked shut, staring into the darkness, realizing the truth had already moved into our home. Quiet as a breath. Heavy as a cinder block. Something was broken. I just didn't know yet how deep the cracks ran. It started with a full tank and a sick feeling in my gut. I told Jenna I had to head into town early Saturday morning, said something about picking up parts for the mower. She barely looked up from her phone, just mumbled something about needing to prep for next Tuesday's yoga. I gave her a kiss on the head and walked out the door like it was any other day. But it wasn't. It was the day I stopped hoping I was wrong. The road out to the Sandstone Lodge was familiar in that uncomfortable way, like an old injury you feel coming with the weather. 20 miles of cracked blacktop and tree-lined stretches where time felt slower. I drove with both windows down, no radio, just the whistle of wind and the hum of tires keeping me company. Every turn of the wheel tightened the knot in my chest. I passed a bait shop, an old rusted-out billboard for a fireworks stand, and then the faded sign for the Sandstone crept into view like a bad memory you'd buried too shallow. It sat low on the land, like it didn't want to be noticed. Long row of units with peeling paint and rusted hinges. Neon sign buzzed a dull pink, one letter flickering in and out, MOT_L. The gravel lot out front held maybe 5 cars, but I only needed to see one. Her Ford Escape. Silver. Rear bumper still had the scratch I told her I'd buff out 6 months ago. Parked right there. Unit 6. My hands started sweating on the steering wheel, and I had to pull over just past the motel, under the cover of some trees. I killed the engine and sat there, the ticking of the cooling motor loud in the silence. This wasn't a time for rage. This was a time for clarity. I opened the glove box, pulled out the small camera I'd bought from Walmart the day after Mrs. Henson's visit. Nothing fancy. Just enough zoom and a timestamp. I took a notepad and pen from the center console, the kind I used for supply lists at the shop. This time, I was recording something else. I stepped out slow, careful, like the air might catch me in the act. The road was quiet. One car passed in 20 minutes, a pickup with a dog hanging out the side window. I ducked behind a tree and waited. It didn't take long. The door to Unit 6 opened just a crack. I raised the camera. Click. A figure stepped out, tall, jeans, blue flannel shirt, same broad build Beverly mentioned. He stretched like he'd had a long nap and looked around with zero urgency. Didn't even lock the door. Just lit a cigarette and leaned on the hood of her car like he owned the morning. A few seconds later, she stepped out after him. Jenna, wearing her yoga leggings. Same hoodie she always tossed into the laundry basket when she came back smelling like cedar and sweat. She didn't look flustered. She didn't look rushed. She looked comfortable. Too comfortable. She said something to him. I couldn't hear, too far, but he laughed. She touched his arm. Click. Click. They stood close. Not talking much. Just sort of being there. Like this was normal. Routine. I watched as she opened the passenger door, reached in, pulled out a water bottle and took a drink. I knew that bottle. It had her initials on the side, a Christmas gift from her sister. Click. He kissed her on the cheek. Not the kind of thing you'd do if you had anything to hide. Click. I scribbled down the time, 10:42 a.m. Wrote down what they were wearing. License plate on his truck. Kentucky tags. I didn't know the guy. Never seen him in town. But his face was burned into my brain like a bad brand. They stood there for a bit longer, then climbed into separate vehicles. She adjusted the rear view like always, paused to fix her hair. I could see her smile in the mirror before she pulled away. I stayed put until both cars were gone. When I finally got back to the truck, my knees felt unsteady. Not from fear. Not from anger, either. It was more like standing at the edge of a roof, realizing there's no more ladder behind you. You either jump, or you don't. I sat there for a long time, going over every image in the camera, every note I'd made. It all looked cold and simple in black ink and pixel. But inside, it felt like someone had lit a slow-burning fire in my chest. I didn't cry, didn't curse. I just drove home. Windows down. Same road. Same wind. Different man. When I pulled into our driveway, Jenna's car wasn't there yet. I parked, went inside, washed my hands, and made coffee. Sat at the kitchen table like always. When she came in later, all bright-eyed, talking about how tough her instructor was today, I just nodded. I didn't ask questions, didn't let on. Because now I had something better than suspicion. I had proof. And I had time. That night, I moved the photos onto a USB and tucked it inside an old flashlight in the garage. Wrote the date on the notepad and folded it into a paperback I kept in the nightstand drawer. Nothing flashy. Just facts. You learn in construction. When a wall starts to crack, you don't yell at it. You measure. You record. You plan. Then you decide whether to patch it or tear the whole damn thing down. Once I had the proof, I stopped asking why and started thinking how. First move was small. Intentional. I took a drive 3 towns over to a place nobody from our area had much reason to visit unless they were looking for used tires or bad barbecue. Daltonville. Population maybe 2,000. Just enough people to blend into, but not enough to draw attention. I found a tiny post office tucked behind a Dollar General and a car wash that hadn't worked right since the Bush administration. I walked in, asked about a P.O. box. Told the lady behind the counter, Janine, I think, some story about having a side gig in landscaping and needing a separate address for clients. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a form and pointed to a pin on a chain. Box 144. Mine. Just like that. I drove back with the key in my pocket and the first stitch in my escape sewn tight. The second part was harder. I've always been a man who builds. That's what I do. Built my house. Built my business. Hell, even helped rebuild half the fire station after that lightning strike back in '08. So tearing things down, that didn't come natural. But I knew if I stuck around much longer pretending things were fine, I'd end up resenting every tool in my shed, and maybe worse. So I started looking. Not for a house. Not for an apartment. I didn't want to be part of anything permanent again. I needed simple, movable, small. Like shedding skin. I found a trailer out in the back corner of a feed store lot. Old but solid. Single wide. White with a faint green stripe along the bottom. Like someone once had dreams of style. A for sale sign sat taped inside the front window, curling at the corners. No listing online. Just a handwritten number and the words cash only. I called. A guy named Buck met me 20 minutes later in a mud-stained Silverado. He didn't say much. Just unlocked the door, let me poke around. It smelled like old pine cleaner and cigarette smoke, but the bones were good. No mold. No leaks. Heater worked. Fridge buzzed to life when I flipped the breaker. How much? I asked. For $1,000. Buck said, arms crossed. I didn't haggle. I handed him a thick envelope. Every dollar counted and collected over the last 2 months from weekend work and under-the-table jobs I'd never reported. He looked surprised but didn't say anything. He just nodded and passed me the title and a key on a little rubber tag. Don't see many folks pay in cash, he muttered. Don't trust banks, I said, which wasn't far from the truth anymore. I parked the trailer in a quiet RV lot on the edge of a place called Cedar Hollow, surrounded by old oaks and silence. Most folks there were retired, keeping to themselves, too busy feeding squirrels or fixing their porch lights to ask where I came from. I told the manager I was taking time off to write a book about fly fishing. He grinned and gave me a monthly rate that was cheap enough to not make a dent. Every time I stepped inside that trailer, I felt lighter. No family photos. No echoes. Just the hum of a tiny fridge and the occasional creak of the wind against aluminum. Peace. Back home, I went about my business like nothing had changed. That included the shop. I owned a small contracting business, just me and a couple of part-timers I'd pick up depending on the job. Roofing, decks, drywall, the kind of work that kept a man's hands calloused and his nights sore. I'd spent the better part of 10 years building up a decent reputation. Cash flow wasn't huge, but steady. Folks knew my name, trusted it. So when I went and put a for sale sign up on the front window at 5:30 one morning, I didn't tell a soul. I made sure it was subtle. No online listing. No open house. Just the sign and a burner phone number written in thick black marker. I knew it'd catch attention eventually, but I wanted the word to spread slow. I still had things to move. Papers to sort. Accounts to shift. I started taking fewer calls. Turned down jobs with a polite, booked solid. Told the local lumber yard I'd be stepping back for health reasons. Nobody questioned it. Everyone's got a cousin with back problems. I boxed up my tools in the back of the shop, left just enough out to make it look lived in. I cleaned out the safe one night, brought home the last of the contracts, the permits, the records. Everything that had my name on it was slowly moving into a locked trunk I kept under the trailer bed. I even called the county office from a payphone, asked about removing myself from a few public business listings, used a different name, gave a story about rebranding. Piece by piece, I became less visible. I'd come home to Jenna like I always did. Fixed the sink when it clogged. Took the trash out. Asked how her day was. She didn't notice anything. Didn't ask about the tired eyes or the missing receipts. She was too busy with her own theater. She didn't know I was already gone. Not yet. But soon, I'd be nothing more than a name on an old envelope. A smudge on her memory. And she could go on thinking I'd never known. But I had. And I had a plan. The first thing I learned when I started planning my exit is this. It's easier to disappear than folks think, if you've got the stomach for it. You have to move slow. Careful. Like gutting a fish without tearing the meat. You don't want to leave blood on the floor. You don't want to make noise. The trick is to vanish so clean, it looks like you were never there. I started with the money. Not all at once, mind you. You pull too much from a joint account, and people start asking questions. Especially a woman like Jenna, who checked balances like other folks check the weather. So I skimmed. Quiet little withdrawals. 20 here, 40 there. Grocery cashback. Gas station ATMs. Every time I made a run to the store, I came back with a little less in the bank and a little more stuffed into the envelope I kept duct taped behind the tool shelf in the garage. I did this for 6 weeks. When the envelope got thick enough, I transferred the money to a local credit union. One she didn't know about. Opened an account under my full name with just my first initial. Said I was setting it up for a side business I was running part-time. No eyebrows raised. Nobody cared. Once I had that, I moved the real funds. Slowly at first, then in chunks once I knew the timing was safe. I left just enough in the joint account to keep her from noticing. Covered the mortgage, the utilities, her yoga classes. A few hundred floating, so the illusion stayed intact. Next was the vehicles. We had two. My old F-150 and her silver Escape. The Escape was technically under both our names. I left it alone. That was hers to keep. But the truck, my truck, I needed that clean. Unattached. No strings. I dug out the title from the fireproof box we kept in the back closet. One night while she was at class, I drove to a guy I knew in Monroe, one town over. Name's Denny. Used to flip cars before the county started cracking down. Still knew how to shuffle paperwork around without making a mess. He ran the VIN, looked it over. You want to sell or just shift it off your name? Shift, I said. Temporary. I'll buy it back under a new LLC later. He nodded like he'd heard it all before. For a small fee, the title was transferred to a ghost business he kept just for this kind of thing. In the system, the truck was no longer mine. I left his shop and drove straight back to the trailer, parked the truck under a camo tarp out by the lot's fence line. From the road, you'd think it was junk. I made sure of that. Then came the house. Not to sell, not yet. But I needed to put distance between me and the paperwork. Our deed was in both names, like most couples do when they think forever means something. I couldn't pull myself out without tipping her off, so I called a lawyer in Granger County, told him I was exploring the early steps of dissolving property ownership due to marital tension. He gave me advice on how to initiate a quitclaim transfer without triggering alarms. It wasn't perfect, but it gave me options. I filed the intent, left the documents and signed, for now. Credit cards were next. I called the banks, shut down the shared ones, claimed suspected fraud when they asked why. Told Jenna it looked like someone had skimmed our info at a gas station. She believed it. Canceled the cards, let her set up new ones in her name alone. Mine stayed separate. I even called the power company one afternoon from a payphone near the RV lot. Hi, this is Thomas D. Whitlow, I said, voice calm and friendly. I'd like to remove myself from responsibility on the electric account at my residence, 184 Lancer Road. They asked if my spouse would remain. I said yes. They filed the change. I did the same for water, trash, and insurance. One by one, the records of my existence attached to that house vanished. I scrubbed myself from our internet provider's bundle plan, told the company we were separating, and I only needed email access for a few weeks longer. They downgraded the account, put it in her name. She never noticed. At night, I'd sit in the trailer and go through documents by lantern light, burning the ones I didn't need. filing the rest into folders labeled with months, dates, and destinations. Every receipt, every withdrawal, every new mailing address. I had a system. A man can live free or live sloppy, but not both. I called in to cancel my voter registration in the county. Told the clerk I was moving for work. She said good luck and removed me from the rolls. The DMV was next. I updated my address to a box in Daltonville. That gave me a new license on the record, separate from the one on file at the house. I was still living there, technically. Still eating the meals she made and laughing at her stories. But I wasn't in that life anymore. I was a ghost in my own home. When I was done, I opened the junk drawer and stared at the last thing that still connected me to her, my name on the life insurance policy. I made a call, shifted the beneficiary to undisclosed trust, citing legal review. They asked if my wife would be notified. No, I said. She doesn't need to know. And just like that, I'd cut the final tie. Everything that was ours had become hers. Everything that was mine was now gone, off the books, off the records, floating under radar in a town she'd never heard me mention. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. And there wasn't a single place left she could find me on paper. The evening I left wasn't stormy or dramatic. No thunder rolling over the hills, no wind howling through the trees. Just stillness. The kind that settles deep in your bones and tells you, plain as daylight, that it's time. I didn't pack much. That would have made it feel like a getaway, like I was running. But I wasn't running, I was walking away. There's a difference. I'd spent the week tying up loose ends, just as quiet as I'd been for months. Kept mowing the lawn, changing the oil in the mower, taking the trash out, and eating the dinners she reheated with barely a glance in my direction. Jenna didn't suspect a thing. If she noticed anything off at all, she probably figured I was just tired. Worn down from work or age or life. That suited me fine. It was a Thursday. She had her usual routine. Came home around 6, microwaved some casserole from the freezer aisle, set 2 plates on the table out of habit. We barely talked. I think she asked me how the job site was going. I told her slow. She nodded. That was that. After dinner, she wandered off to the living room, turned on one of those crime shows where everyone's always guilty and no one ever turns the lights on in the scene. I stood in the kitchen for a bit, watching the sun start to dip below the trees out back. The whole world looked dipped in gold, like it was holding its breath with me. I walked upstairs, slow, quiet. Not sneaky, just calm. I grabbed a small duffel bag from the closet, tossed in 2 flannel shirts, a couple pairs of socks, some underwear, my shaving kit, and the faded blue jeans with the knee worn through from sanding deck boards. I looked at the rest of the closet, my boots, my Sunday coat, the cufflinks from our wedding tucked in a tiny box on the top shelf, and left them all right where they were. Downstairs again, I checked the back door. Locked. Lights off in the kitchen. Jenna was still on the couch, legs curled up, eyes on the screen. I stood there for a long minute, just watching her in the flickering light of the TV. I didn't feel angry anymore. Didn't feel sorry. Didn't feel anything, really. She'd made her choices. I'd made mine. I stepped out the front door without a sound. No note. No dramatic goodbye. I didn't know her that. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want to hear one more lie dressed up in a soft voice. I just wanted to close the chapter. I slid into my truck, no longer in my name, no longer traceable, and sat there for a moment, watching the porch light come on behind me. Motion sensor. It blinked on like it always did, soft and useless. It would blink again in the morning when she stepped out to get her coffee or pretend she had a morning jog. It would light up for an empty driveway, and maybe then she'd notice. The town rolled by in shadows as I pulled out, each house lit from inside like little islands floating in dark water. I passed the gas station where I used to grab coffee before early shifts, the diner with the same blue plate special every Wednesday, the hardware store with the crooked sign I fixed 5 years back for a discount on tools. I didn't stop at any of them. I didn't look back. By the time I hit the county line, it felt like I'd peeled off an old skin. One that didn't fit anymore. One that maybe never had. I didn't cry. Not from joy, not from sorrow. Just drove. Window down. Elbow out. The stars starting to appear one by one, steady and quiet. At a rest stop about 40 miles out, I pulled over. Stretched my legs. Took a long breath. Checked the duffel, still there. Everything I needed, packed in less than 10 minutes. Everything else I left behind. She could keep the furniture, the wedding albums, the house we never really made a home, the framed pictures and the dog-eared books and the bed we no longer shared. I left it all for her. Left her the broken promises, the cold dinners, the hollow routines. Left her the lies she thought were clever and the stories she rehearsed like lines from a play. I left her the silence she'd built around us one evening at a time. She could sit in that silence now. She probably didn't notice at first, just figured I went out for a walk or to grab a pack of smokes. But I never came back. Maybe hours passed before she realized the truck wasn't in the driveway, that the porch light stayed off, that the sound of the door never came. At some point, she'd have walked through the house looking for me, calling out, maybe annoyed. But I was already miles down the road. And that silence she found? That was the parting gift. You'd think after all that planning, all that quiet slipping out the back door, I'd be done with her for good. But life, especially the legal part of it, has a way of circling back whether you like it or not. I figured she'd file first. I wanted her to, actually. Let her be the one to explain it. Let her tell the court I'd up and left with no warning, no bags, no angry shouting match. Just silence. I knew how that'd look on paper. I counted on it. Sure enough, about 3 weeks after I disappeared, I got a thick envelope at my P.O. box in Daltonville. Her name in the return corner, typed neat like it would make everything more polite. Inside was a packet from some high-priced attorney downtown. Fancy letterhead, all flourishes and italics. Said Jenna was seeking divorce on the grounds of abandonment. Claimed I left without cause or communication. Said she was entitled to the house, the vehicles, and financial support commensurate with her marital expectations. That's lawyer speak for, she wanted the whole damn pie. I chuckled reading it. It was so clean, so rehearsed, so smug. She thought I'd just walk away and leave her the life I'd built. That's the part that burned more than anything, how certain she must have been that she'd win. But I wasn't just out there in some trailer licking my wounds. I'd been ready. The day I left, I mailed a second envelope. Certified, time-stamped. To a lawyer I'd found 2 months before. Guy named Carrick. Not flashy. Didn't drive a BMW or wear gold watches. He kept a clean office in a strip mall between a mattress store and a vape shop. But the man knew his stuff. And more importantly, he believed in preparation. I handed him everything weeks ago. Photos. Dates. A copy of my logbook, every yoga night marked with time and location. Printouts of the motel registry I'd acquired thanks to a sympathetic clerk I tipped $100. Even the time-stamped snapshots of Jenna and the man she claimed she barely knew, Mr. Blue Flannel and his truck with Kentucky plates. Carrick said nothing when I slid the folder across the table. Just nodded slow and said, "This'll do." So when her lawyer served me, Carrick was ready. He filed a response within 48 hours. Contesting every claim. Attached the proof. He didn't argue emotions, he argued facts. Adulterous conduct, backed by witness accounts, photographs, and written notes with time and place. No room for interpretation. The best part? He requested an immediate hearing on fault. See, our state still allows for a divorce based on wrongdoing. Most folks don't bother. It's easier to just split and move on. But in cases like mine, when one party tries to take it all while pretending their hands are clean, fault matters. Jenna never saw it coming. Carrick told me what happened after. Her lawyer, some young guy in a tailored vest with a slick haircut, showed up full of confidence. Thought this would be open and shut. Then Carrick dropped the folder on the table during the pre-hearing meeting. He flipped through the photos, the registry records, the notes about the guy she'd been reconnecting with on the side. Said the other lawyer got real quiet, then pale, then just muttered something about needing a moment to speak with his client. Didn't take long. Within a day, I got a call from Carrick. She's withdrawing the petition, he said. And her lawyer's stepping back from the case. Why? I asked, though I already knew. Conflict of ethics, he said. Apparently, she didn't tell him the full story. He's not interested in representing someone who lies to his face before a courtroom gets involved. I laughed so hard I had to set the phone down. She tried to paint me as the villain, but forgot that truth doesn't wash off just because you clean your face in public. A month later, the judge finalized the divorce with fault assigned to her. Clear-cut adultery. That meant no alimony, no claims on my earnings, no share of the business I'd sold. She kept the house, but it was already falling apart by then. The escape too, though I heard through the grapevine it got repossessed not long after. Me? I walked away clean. No debt. No ties. No obligations. She got the crumbs. I got my name back. And that, as far as I'm concerned, was worth every mile I put between us. I wasn't planning to see her. Lord knows I'd gone out of my way to avoid it. After everything, I made sure to shop in different towns, take different roads, even switch up my routine. It wasn't out of fear. I just didn't want to see the face of someone who'd turned our life into a lie and then tried to cash in on the pieces. But life's funny. No matter how well you draw the map, sometimes it throws a bend in the road you didn't plan for. It was a Thursday afternoon. I'd just come off a long morning working on a fence job out past Beaver Creek. The sun had baked me good, and my arms were still gritty with sawdust and sweat. I needed something cold to drink, maybe some fixings for chili to cook back at the trailer that night. Nothing special. I usually stuck to the corner market in town, but they'd been out of half the stuff I needed lately. So I swung by a discount grocery about 30 minutes further out, a spot I hadn't been to in months. Just figured I'd take the scenic way home, stretch the drive, clear my head. I came out with a bag of onions, a loaf of cornbread, and a six-pack of Shiner I'd been craving all week. And that's when I saw her. At first, I didn't recognize her. She was hunched over, loading bags into the back of a beat-up green minivan. The kind with one sliding door that never quite shuts and a crack across the rear windshield that looked like it had been there a while. Rust curled up around the wheel wells, and the bumper sagged on the left side like it was tired of being held together. It was the shape of her, the tilt of her head, something in the way she stood. Then she turned just enough for the sun to catch her profile. Jenna. I stopped dead in my tracks, standing by my truck with the grocery bag in one hand and a half-open beer box in the other. She hadn't seen me. Not yet. She looked worn. There's no kinder way to put it. Her hair was pulled back in a sloppy bun, but not in the way she used to do when she was gardening or painting the bedroom. This was the kind you do when you've given up trying. Her face, once always made up with care, was bare. Her skin looked tired. Not old, exactly. Just heavy. Like whatever was sitting on her shoulders had taken root in her bones. She moved slowly, methodically, bag by bag. Every now and then she'd stop to rub her back or sigh and lean against the bumper like she needed a breather. I could have walked away. Should have. But I didn't. I watched her fumble with the last bag, then wrestle with a gallon of milk that nearly slipped from her hand. She caught it at the last second and muttered something under her breath. Probably a curse. The kind she used to whisper at the stove when it boiled over or at the dog when it tracked mud through the kitchen. Then she looked up and saw me. For a second, neither of us moved. It wasn't dramatic. No gasps. No running. Just two people caught in a moment too small for the history between them. She didn't wave. Neither did I. She just stared, eyes wide, not with anger, not even sorrow. It was something colder than either. Recognition. And underneath that, regret. I held her gaze just long enough to see it. Not the regret of losing me. No, I don't flatter myself. It was the kind of regret that comes when you realize you've traded something solid for something shiny, and now the shine's all gone. She blinked first, dropped her eyes, shut the minivan's trunk with a weak thud and walked around to the driver's side. No pride left in her shoulders. No rush in her step. Just a quiet surrender. I watched her drive away, the back bumper rattling like an old screen door in the wind. That was it. No words. No second chance. No apology. Just the sound of an engine that didn't want to start and a woman who looked like life had chewed her up and spit her out. And you know what? I didn't feel triumphant. Didn't feel vindicated. I felt, still. There she was, living in the mess she made. And there I was, walking toward my truck with my groceries and a quiet mind. For the first time in years, I felt nothing at all for her. Not hate. Not longing. Not even sadness. Just a dull understanding. She was a chapter in a book I no longer read. And whatever story she was living now, I wasn't part of it. Not anymore. I didn't need much when I started over, just space, quiet, and something of my own. I bought a small patch of land out past Cedar Hollow, nothing fancy. 20 acres, a rundown cabin, and a stream that whispered more sense than most people ever had. The cabin needed work, sure, but I didn't mind. I fixed it one nail at a time. Patched the roof, built new shelves, re-leveled the porch. It was slow, honest work. Work that asked nothing from me except patience. Most mornings, I'd head down to the stream with a rod and a tin of bait. The trout weren't big, but they were steady. I'd fish for hours, not caring if I caught anything. Just casting, waiting, and letting the water carry off the last of what I used to be. In town, I kept to myself. Took odd jobs when they came, fence repair, electrical fixes, a bit of roofing. Folks didn't ask much. They liked that I didn't talk unless I had something worth saying. Nights were quiet. I'd sit out on the porch with a beer and watch the sky go dark, writing down my thoughts in an old notebook. Sometimes her name would show up in the margins, but it didn't mean anything anymore. Just a mark from another life. She was a name I used to know. Nothing more. These days, I wake up without weight on my chest. No pretending. No second-guessing. Just the wind, the trees, and the knowledge that I got out in time. And that's enough for me. Share your thoughts in the comments. Is disappearing cleaner than divorce, or just another form of punishment? If you like the story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.